There is a fungus that crawls inside an ant's brain and takes over its body completely. Not metaphorically, not approximately. It hijacks the ant's nervous system, forces it to climb to a precise height, clamp its jaws around a leaf, and then kills it from the inside. While the ant is still alive. That is not science fiction. That is happening right now, in forests all over the world, quietly, underneath your feet, and the ant never had a chance. So here's the question you need to sit with for the next few minutes. If a fungus, something with no brain, no eyes, no nervous system of any kind, can take complete control of another creature's mind, what does that say about what a mind actually is? What does it say about control, and what does it say about you? Because the answer might be more uncomfortable than you think. The fungus is called Ophiocordyceps unilateralis. Most people call it the zombie ant fungus. It lives in tropical forests, in the Amazon, in Thailand, across Southeast Asia and Central America. It spends part of its life as spores drifting through the forest floor, invisible and patient. When a spore lands on a carpenter ant, it does not attack immediately. It waits. It begins to grow through the ant's exoskeleton, slowly, over days, sending filaments called hyphae through the ant's body like roots through soil. And then, at a precise moment, something changes. The ant begins to behave strangely. It leaves its colony without explanation. It climbs, not randomly but deliberately, to a very specific height above the forest floor, usually between 25 and 30 centimeters. Never higher, never lower. The ant finds a leaf vein at exactly this height, bites down with its mandibles with a force scientists call a death grip, locks its jaw in place, and dies. Not randomly, not approximately, exactly the right height, every time. Across every species of host ant this fungus targets. Biologist David Hughes at Penn State University has spent years studying this behavior in the field and in the lab. What he found when he examined the muscle tissue of infected ants is something that should make you stop completely. The fungus does not invade the brain. It does not need to. Instead, it surrounds the muscles that control the jaw and infiltrates them directly, bypassing the brain entirely, taking command of the body at the mechanical level, making the ant clamp down, not because of anything happening in its nervous system, but because the fungus is physically controlling the muscles like a puppeteer pulling strings. The ant's brain, Hughes found, remains largely intact, which means there is a real possibility the ant experiences everything. It simply cannot stop. Hughes described the fungus as the most sophisticated parasite he had ever encountered. That word, sophisticated, is worth pausing on. This is an organism with no brain, no eyes, no nervous system, no way to think, to plan, to observe, to decide. And yet it executes a behavioral manipulation so precise, so consistent, so perfectly calibrated to the geometry of the forest that the outcome is always the same. The ant always ends up in exactly the right spot. But here's where it gets stranger. The height the ant climbs to is not random. It is calibrated specifically to optimize the growth of the fungus after the ant dies. Once the ant has clamped down and died, a stalk begins growing from the back of the ant's head. Over the following days, it lengthens, reaching upward and eventually bursts open, releasing a new cloud of spores into the air currents exactly at the height most likely to land on other ants passing below. The ant's body becomes a spore cannon, positioned perfectly, by a fungus that cannot see, cannot think, and cannot move on its own. Biologist Sandra Anderson-Sum has documented how other ants in the colony respond to this. They recognize infected individuals before the behavioral changes become obvious. They physically carry the infected ant away from the colony and deposit it far from the nest. The colony, in other words, has developed a form of behavioral immunity. They can detect what the fungus is doing and quarantine the victim before it can turn the body into a weapon. The fungus and the ant colony have been locked in this evolutionary arms race for millions of years. The fungus getting better at hiding, the ants getting better at detecting. Researcher Carissa de Beeker at the University of Amsterdam has gone further. She analyzed the chemical compounds the fungus produces inside the ant's body and found something remarkable. The fungus is not just growing inside the ant. It is producing targeted neuroactive compounds. chemicals that interfere specifically with the ant's ability to regulate its own movement. It is not simply colonizing the body, it is chemically rewriting the behavioral instructions coming from the nervous system. It is, in the most literal sense, drugging the ant into submission and then pulling the strings directly. Think about what that means. The fungus does not have a nervous system, but it has evolved over millions of years to produce the exact chemical cocktail needed to subvert someone else's nervous system. It has learned the language of the ant's brain without having a brain of its own. And this is where the story stops being just about ants. Because Ophiocordyceps is not the only organism doing this. The natural world is full of parasites that manipulate the minds and behaviors of their hosts. Toxoplasma gondii, a single-celled parasite, infects rats and suppresses their fear of cats, making them walk toward the smell of cat urine instead of away from it, which gets the rat eaten, which gets the parasite into the cat's gut where it can reproduce. The hairworm, Spinochordodes telenia, grows inside a cricket, and when it is ready to reproduce, it alters the cricket's behavior so dramatically that the cricket, which would normally avoid water, walks into a stream and drowns. The hairworm swims out of the drowned cricket's body and continues its life cycle in the water. The jewel wasp, Ampulex compressa, stings a cockroach in two precise locations in the brain, delivers a targeted dose of venom that blocks the cockroach's escape reflex without killing it, then leads the docile cockroach by its antennae back to the wasp's burrow like a leash, where it lays an egg inside the cockroach's body, and the larva eats the cockroach alive from the inside while it is still technically capable of escaping but chemically unable to try. None of these organisms have what you would call a mind. None of them have intentions. None of them planned any of this. And yet they have all independently over millions of years of evolution arrived at the same strategy. Find the control system of another creature and rewrite it. Which brings you back to the question you started with. What does it say about you? Your behavior is also the product of chemistry. Your moods, your impulses, your willingness to take risks or seek comfort, your sense of who you are in any given moment, all of it runs on neurotransmitters and hormones and electrical signals in a system that, from the outside, looks remarkably like something that could be intercepted. The bacteria in your gut produce compounds that affect your mood and anxiety levels. Some researchers believe your gut microbiome influences your food cravings by producing chemicals that make certain foods more appealing. The idea of a perfectly sealed, completely autonomous, fully self-directed mind, the kind of mind you assume you have, may be less accurate than you think. The zombie ant fungus doesn't just reveal something about ants, it reveals something about the nature of control itself, about how thin the line is between a decision and a chemical instruction, about how much of what any creature does, including you, is driven by systems that exist entirely below the level of awareness. There is a fungus in a tropical forest right now manipulating an ant with more precision than any surgeon. It has no brain. It has no plan. It has only a billion years of evolutionary pressure, quietly sharpening one single trick until that trick is perfect. And somewhere in that forest, an ant is climbing a plant stem, completely convinced, if it is convinced of anything at all, that it is doing exactly what it wants to do. You probably think you are different. You probably think your choices are your own. But the fungus doesn't care what you think. It never did. You just watched a fungus with no brain take complete control of an ant's body, and somewhere in a tropical forest right now, it's happening again. If that broke something in your head, hit like and subscribe. The next one hits just as hard.